All right, welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. Today is October the 8th, 2017. Thanks for listening. Today we have Selena Chambers. Hey, Selena.
Yay.
Yep. Let's do introductions and prizes. We'll get to introducing Selena last. So let's start with you, ASAP. ASAP will be interviewing Selena, by the way, today. So.
I'm Hale. I rate for Mike and the Lovecraft eZine.
Glenn, you want to introduce yourself? You're going to be talking later about a Lovecraftian game, but...
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name's Glenn. I'm the founder and lead developer of Darkcraft Studios, a Lovecraftian horror developer.
Okay. Pete?
Pete Rolick, writer, editor, man about town.
Rick?
Rick Lay, writer.
And Matt, and you have a prize, Matt, too.
Yeah, I'm Matt Carpenter. I'm editing a book called Pickman's Gallery. The prize today is a really neat book. It's called Fairy Tales. It's not mythos per se, but it is modern updates and horrific takes on fairy tales by the sourced by the Brothers Grimm. Edited by Stephen Jones. There's nice illustrations by Alan Lee. Really beautiful stuff in here. And the publisher is Joe Fletcher Books. This is a hardcover edition, and I think it would look really nice on anybody's shelf.
Okay. If you want to be in the running for that, in case I forget to announce it at the end of the show, it's Lovecraft eZine prizes at gmail.com. And just Lovecraft eZine prizes at gmail.com, and just put your the subject of the book, the book in the subject of the email. Sorry, so which would be fairy tales. So hey, Selena, you want to introduce yourself and then ASAP can interview you for us?
Yeah. So my name is Selena Chambers. I'm a writer and an editor. I had a collection come out this year called Calls for Submission, which looks like this.
Yep.
And anything else I have to reveal, I think ASAP will just have to drag it out of me.
All right. That would be go for ASAP.
I don't think it'll be hard either. I mean, it's a wonderful collection.
Thank you.
I really liked it. And first of all, the name is genius. You know, and how did you come up with the name?
It was actually a joke at I was at a World Horror BarCon in Atlanta. I guess this would have been maybe 2014. And I was chatting with my friend Scott Nicolay, and he was kind of giving me shit about when was I going to have a collection out. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think any of my stuff goes together. It's all stuff written for submissions and editors. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe I'll just put it together and call it Calls for Submission and just be done with it. So it kind of just came as a joke. But then the more I thought about it, and the more that I read the stories and started thinking about organizing them, I realized there was a double entendre there that made it less funny and more interesting.
Yeah, because it's always been funny. The submission process. So when I first saw that, I cracked up about it. And the other thing I was going to ask you was Telekinesis Press. I mean, I apologize right off the bat. I will screw up a pronunciation. So if I mispronounce anything, correct me quickly. Don't even hesitate on that one. How did you first hook up with him? Because that was my first introduction to them, and he's a sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
Like my interaction with him, like I felt really bad when I was like, I hate PDFs. Can I get a hard copy of this? I really do. I hate PDFs. And he was just the sweetest man, going back and forth with him. And I had never really heard of them, much to my chagrin. I feel really bad, so I apologize if he's watching right now. But since then, I have looked into their offerings, and they are a top-notch organization. Not only my interactions with him, but the books that I have, purchased since then. And how did you first come into contact with Telekinesis?
So the gentleman ASAP's mentioning is named Mark Givens. And he's the editor of Telekinesis, and he's out in California. Mark was the first person to ever publish me. He published a weird gonzo essay for his magazine, Mung Bean magazine, in, gosh, 2006 or 7. And the way I kind of stumbled upon him is, so my background is art history. And at the time, I was really interested in remodernism and the Stuckist group. And just real quick, what they are, they're part of a movement that is interested in bringing representation back to art and sensibility back into art. They were kind of anti-abstraction. But having said that, they did a lot of weird Dada stuff. But the way that I found Mark was he did a Stuckist issue. And so I kind of was like, well, this guy is obviously for me. So did the thing that you do, and he published me, and we've been friends ever since. He has supported me in every endeavor, including this collection. So when he announced he was closing the magazine, I'm bad about years right now. I feel like I'm 90 years old, like 2013, 2014, something around there. He also announced he was doing his press and kind of said, you know, if you ever have anything, let me know. So it's kind of a very long-term friendship. And it's yielded nothing but wonderful fruit. He is a sweetheart, and he's very much doing all this for the passion and for the love.
Yeah, just because, I mean, everything that just him and I writing back and forth on that, I was really impressed with everything that he did. And then seeing the books that he's offered, it's just the depth and variety of it has really impressed me. I mean, I didn't mean to step on your toes there.
No, you didn't. No, I agree. Everyone should, check out Pelikinesis. So he doesn't, I feel like the audience right now might be predominantly weird horror readers, but Pelikinesis has a whole cornucopia of writing. They have dystopia science fiction by like Susan Weintraub, experimental poetry that can fit all needs. Even like, I think they have a children's book that was like the first children's book to feature a trans character. So even though they may not seem like they have the thing that you're typically into, what's fun about them is you find a new thing that you realize you're into. And that's why I went with them. I liked their variety and their versatility.
And then I know I'm bad, really bad with years, so I sympathize with you on this one. But approximately what are the years covered in the collection? Because I realize that the publishing in that, because did you receive a pushcard or were you nominated for a pushcard? I apologize. My memory is...
I was nominated. I'm always like a bridesmaid and never a bride. So I was nominated. And actually the story that was nominated was of Parallel and Parcel, which Mark published in Mung Bean magazine. And I think he published it around like 2012, 2013, but that story was conceived in like 2007, didn't get finished until 2010. But to answer your original question, it spans about 12 years of my career. So I think the oldest story in there might be around 06, 07.
Yeah, because I think I said that in my review that I wrote. What really impressed me was when I looked at the publication history in the book, nearly every story in there had been published.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of them weren't written for that book itself. Like a lot of short story collections that you read nowadays, especially in weird fiction, there might be a small section of those that have been published elsewhere, but the majority of them were written specifically for publication within the short story collection. And like, for lack of a better word, you're a working writer. Like you're out there pounding the pavement, And you were also a journalist at the same time, weren't you?
I was.
My understanding of it?
Yeah, at this point, I wouldn't call myself a journalist anymore, but earlier in my career, I pursued that. I was kind of following in the footsteps of what I thought writing should be. So that means I was following a model from like Hemingway's 1920s. So I thought, writing for a newspaper first would get me the gumption that I needed. And it was good, but I quickly realized that was its own engulfing career. So I retired.
And the other thing that, because I think I first ran across, and I'm going to screw up the pronunciation here again, was in Dunham Manors Press, the Xenonides magazine.
I have no idea how to say that.
Yeah, I have no idea. Thank God that you said that. I'm like, I know it's from the Godflesh albums, and that's about as far as it goes. But your Poapathy.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you could just tell everybody, because I don't think that those get a wide enough circulation. So if you could just explain to everybody what those were, because I thought those were genius.
Thank you. So, okay, the way I got started in genre is it was 2009. It's a bicentennial for Edgar Allan Poe. I love Poe. You can't see anything, but there's like my little Poe shrine. So I kind of broke into genre magazines by writing celebrations of Poe. And in doing that, I coined a term called Popathy, which is a disease of the imagination where you're obsessed with synesthesia and atmosphere and dread and all the gothy things due to too much reading of Poe. So I've kind of taken that idea and run with it in Xenobus with a series of columns called The Poe Bug. And they're exploring the various instances. So just like, you know, we have more of a discussion about Lovecraft's influence in horror, and Poe comes up every now and then as like a recognized grandfather and all that stuff, but there's not the same sort of cottage industry that's like cohesive like Lovecraft, except that there is, but it's just really spread out. So these columns are looking at where Poe is popping up in pop culture to show how ubiquitous he is. And that is in a literary magazine by Dunham's Manor Press. That's Jordan Krall's imprint, and it's called Xenobus. I think it's Xnyobis.
Right.
I always juxtapose the letters too.
Yeah, I always do. And then when I'm going to like write about it, I have to go dig them up out of my bookcase and be like, okay, let me write this down again. Or I forget how to spell it. I'm like, okay, let me look up Godflesh, because I always remember it's on a Godflesh album. But I remember you did one that was on the movies that have had really good representations of Poe in there. And wasn't it in one of the Thackeray guides that the first one came out with, and then you ran with it from there?
Well, no. Well, kind of. The Thackeray guide actually kind of inspired me to come up with the term Popathy.
Right.
I read that when it came out, and it was around the same time that I was ready to start these celebrations of Poe. But I do have a short story about Popathy that is in the collection, but it first appeared in the sequel to the Thackeray Guide to Diseases. It's the Cabinet of Curiosities.
Okay, cool.
I just want to jump in and say that I really enjoyed that one.
Thank you.
That's cool. Yeah, I knew there was some weird connection. I couldn't quite place it exactly where it went. And it's weird what you say about Poe, because it's like, I always read that Poe has more of an academic industry behind him, and Lovecraft is just starting to make his inroads into academia.
Yeah.
Accepted. So it's kind of weird that it's flipped that way. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And actually, during the bicentennial, I went to the Poe conference. I was a member of the Poe Studies Association, which meant I paid like $20 a year and got books and whatever. So I went to the big shindig for that in Philadelphia. And when I told people what I did, which was write about Poe and pop culture for, you know, mainstream magazines, they looked at me like I was insane. So I was very much the odd bird out. And so I do think, because he is capital C canon, he kind of doesn't get to escape that space as much. I think it's getting better. I mean, there's been efforts like Ellen Datlow's Poe is a really good anthology that demonstrates the influence and stuff. But yeah, I totally agree with that. Maybe it'll switch again. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Well, that and your story that's within your collection, where it's talking about from Virginia's point of view.
A parallel and parcel.
Yeah, I found that it was an amazing story. And like that's kind of one of the questions that you and I have been going back and forth to, where I found it interesting that that was one of the few times where she had like a familial background. You know, she had that ability in there. And where did you first publish that, if you don't mind me?
That was first published in Mung Bean.
Oh, that's right. You said that. Sorry.
And that was kind of, I call that my I got it story, because it's when I got it. It took me 6 months to write it in the form that it is now, in a short form, but it kind of went through a series of evolutions where first I thought I could write a novel. That was not happening. That was happening during my journalist days. That was not working out, and I just kind of kept banging my head against the wall. And eventually I got to where I found this epigram. I found this letter from her nurse that alluded to her having had a letter that she had under her pillow on her deathbed. And the nurse, you know, was observing her handing it to Poe, and Poe kind of breaks down in tears. And supposedly it was a letter from his father, John Allen's second wife. And sorry, pardon me. It was a letter from John Allen to Poe before he died, but the second wife kept it from him. And basically, I kind of got real nerdy and was reading the Foucault that's interested in Poe. I can't remember. The one that wrote about the purloined letter is either Lacan or Foucault. I can't remember at this point. But a friend made me read that because he knew I was writing about Poe. And there's this whole meditation on how fates were changed by purloined letters. And so I kind of felt that that was a key. I had finally picked the lock. So following that premise, like her entire life opened up to me because she was no longer this child bride that maybe, you know, people try to victimize her, people try to make her just this very shallow prototype of a Poe lady. And all of a sudden she became this sort of premeditative, conniving person that maybe was in charge of her own fate. So that lock-picking mechanism is what I apply to every story I write now. I try to figure out what is the character's deal before I even care about plot. So that was my aha story.
Right. And I know that when we first interacted was when I asked about your views on horror, and I think it was quiet horror. And the thing that fascinated me about you, and especially Kinter in your collection, we've talked about this, is you're very fascinated by, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth here, but you have this amazing theory of the smaller figures in history and how they resist. You know, and I find that interesting, but at the same time, you have this enormous pull to the romantics, like Mary Shelley and Poe and other figures like that. How do you see those coming together, almost? Because on one hand, you have the very small figures that you write about, and then on the other hand, you have these great figures that everybody, you know, kind of they're held in such esteem in our societies.
Right. Well, I guess my interest in that comes from reading so much biography. And most biography I read is about the Romantics or the 19th century. Up until I graduated college, that was all I read. So in doing that, when you start really deeply reading these texts, you start to see these small figures popping up. Mary Shelley is a really good example. One, because we only really talk about her to the point that Shelley dies. And so she wrote Frankenstein, she married Percy Shelley, Shelley died, she kept his heart, the end. But she lived to be 53, and within all of those years, she interacted with some fascinating minor literary figures who were momentous at the time, but are just footnotes. So I'm very fascinated with kind of going down those rabbit holes and seeing what those people contributed. She was friends with a person whose name I don't remember, but she started one of the first free slave communes in the United States and tried to get Mary Shelley to come live there. And I mean, that's a whole novel right there, is what was that about? And so just things like that. So I think my interest in that came from just my reading. How I think the romantic influence, just like the ideas of romanticism and rescuing these, or it's not rescuing, but it's like telling a story of the overlooked things that no-name people do in history that make changes. To me, that is directly interrelated to sublimity, because what is sublimity but trying to fight against that which we can't control? So I really find that's my cosmic horror, basically, is romanticism, sublimity, and how we interact with it, which is why Frankenstein has always been one of my favorite novels.
Yeah, and I think you and I have talked about just how weird Frankenstein is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about how old science fiction, almost up until the 1980s, when it became very codified,
Mm-hmm.
it's strange. You know, when you go back, and especially, but even before then, if you go to turn of the century science fiction, it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in the way that we consider weird nowadays. It is just truly bizarre.
Yeah.
And you read everything that they do, and you're like, when did this all happen? I don't want to jump all over the place, but I found your Wandering Spirits project to be really strange and fascinating. If you could just fill them in really quickly for people who don't know about it, I thought that was an amazing project.
Thank you. I thought I want to show the cover because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's by Yves Turingi, who is blowing up everybody's bookshelf with his beautiful art. So what this is, Wandering Spirits, is 3 letters that I've written to someone about my tracing the footsteps of Frankenstein. It takes place in Geneva, in Ingolstadt, Germany, and in Mont Blanc in France. And it's all based on stuff that I really did. And I'm just kind of reliving and interacting and learning more about the book and Mary Shelley as I'm doing this. And in doing that, I'm trying to also like find communion with romanticism, which that sounds very religious, but the point was it was a way to kind of find a religious respect for nature without having Christian ideals put on there. And so it sort of explores what sublimity really means when you encounter it. And it doesn't read that heavy, I hope, but that's what it is. And it's a very thin book. It came out last year. It's limited edition. If you are interested in buying it, you can contact me, but it's not available anywhere for purchase anymore. But yeah, it first appeared on Weird Fiction Review. And for the bicentennial of when the contest was done at Villa Diodati, the whole like, ooh, who can write the best ghost story, that was last summer. That was the bicentennial for that. So it was out in limited edition of 200 to celebrate that.
Selena, just in case anybody... So we both had a question at the same time. I just wanted to ask, how can people contact you if they want to buy that book? Twitter, or do you want them to email you? Or
you can do Twitter. My Twitter is BaBlueZombie, which somewhere we can put that maybe.
Yeah, I'll put that below after the show.
My email's a really weird email. So I'll
put them both in the program notes on the podcast and on YouTube after the show.
Email's probably the best, but
email.
Yeah. But Twitter's
okay. Matt, you had a question?
Yeah, my question was, you said Weird Fiction Review. Do you mean the Centipede Press publication?
Oh, I mean Anna Jeff Vandermeer's Weird Fiction Review.
Okay.
not Joshi's.
And actually, that would be a good segue just to talk about your organization, Bablu, that gets mentioned a few times within calls for submission. I love that.
Thank you.
I mean, because it showed up, once again, I'm going to screw up a pronunciation. Neuroenthesia, and it pronounced the short story for me and saved me from there. Yeah, because that's a great story. And there was another story within there where the Bablu shows up.
Remnants of Lost Empire.
Yeah.
Are there 2 or 3?
Yeah.
You would think I would know all this, but
I should have written it down when I was getting prepared for this, but I got cocky.
Yeah, it's just 2 stories. So it's Remnants of Lost Empire and the Neurastheniac.
Yeah, if you could just like kind of tell people about the Bob Blue, because I thought it was a great idea.
Thank you. So the Bob Blue is like my secret project that is slowly coming into fruition, but it exists right now as sort of the off-screen organization that drives a lot of my stories. They're very much interested in preserving a feminine space within the pursuit of knowledge. So it's like the Miskatonic University, but it's all women. And it's them pursuing what is being lost in history because the men are dictating what is saved and what's not. So in Remnants of Lost Empire, it deals with a woman who, where did she go? It was for Nate Peterson's Starry Wisdom Library, and it was based on that story, Remnants of Lost Empire. And it turns out that it actually wasn't a man who wrote that book, but it was a woman who had been lost to history named Sarah Pickman. And it's actually a travelogue of her trying to find her dead baby, which might be more of a sacrifice to the gods than anything else. But the only reason that we have any record of that is the Bob Blue excavated and like resurrected her story to try to tell the truth about what really happened. And the Neurastheniac, it's even more removed. It's more of a footnote. I use it metatextually. The story of the Neurastheniac is about a beat poet named Helen Heck that no one knew about because she could care less about fame or publication. So she just sort of wrote in her journals and eventually killed herself because she could not deal with her mental illness. But the reason that we have her poetry or her journals that you read in this story is because the Bob Blue republished it in a Lost Figures anthology. So the Bob Blue is basically an organization of resurrecting minor blue stockings. And I'm trying to do more with it and more development where we actually see behind the curtain and stuff like that in future works. But that's where it stands right now as far as calls for submission goes.
Matt, you got a question?
Actually, this kind of reminded me of a real historical situation. With your interest, you might even have heard of Hildegard of Bingen. She is from like the 14th century, something like that. She was a mystic. She was a famous abbess. She had an abbey. She was a healer. Popes would write to her for advice.
Mm-hmm.
And, she wrote incredibly ethereal and intoxicating music. I have some recordings. But there was a whole culture of women who were like very independent and had this mysticism and a shared history of Christianity, of their thinking on it. And basically they had some power, but they were systematically suppressed after Hildegard. And I just didn't know if like you had made reference to that in your thinking about this particular information.
I haven't yet, but the Bob Blue, the name itself definitely harkens back to that time. Sorry, I think we got some feedback going on. It harkens back to that time when covens were the only source for women's spaces, really, whether they were pushed or not. And the Bob Blue was an actual organization from that time. It's not my organization, but I'm very interested in that time period in regards to that. And Hildegard will eventually show herself.
Yeah, because you also had this story with Gilderay and
Joan of Arc.
Yes, Joan of Arc. And I got to tell you, my wife was dying laughing because I have a total Joan of Arc complex to the point where she buys me Joan of Arc medals all the time. But that story, I love that story. And I was like, oh my God, I wish she would develop this further into a novel.
Thank you. Yeah, so the story he's referencing is, it was my first attempt at writing Lovecraftiana.
It's very done for Lovecraftiana, too. That's...
Thank you. So it's Joan of Arc. She was called. Instead of by, you know, the god above, it's the god below, sort of a thing. But it's a warning letter from Joan of Arc to Guy de Rais that what has possessed her is coming for him, and he has to do its bidding, and it's not going to be good. And you may recall Guy de Rais is the gentleman that supposedly had a nice little torture dungeon for young boys during that time in France. And Guy de Rais and Joan of Arc were actually friends on the battlefield in real life. And that's kind of, I wrote that before I had any idea of the Bablu, but that sort of started my thinking process on that because I read her actual testimonies in the court proceedings when they were persecuting her, and kind of got this idea of the different sacred spaces that were being presented.
Yeah, can you tell the story title of that again? Because I'm...
It's The Good Shepherdess.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm getting old and, you know, the whole thing. But yeah, because that story, and I'm not sure if I passed it on to you. There was a newspaper article recently done, I think in The Guardian, where an English historian is about to publish a book where she went back to the court records of the time. And she's like, yeah, this is pretty much a Jacques de May situation where the church wanted his lands and went, oh no, you're a Satanist. And backdated all of the evidence that he tortured and killed all of these boys and everything. And there's no evidence to really back it up.
That's crazy. No, you hadn't sent me that.
I'm sorry. I'll have to dig it back up because I was like, oh, I'm buying that the minute that it does. Like, I'm a huge Bataille fan, and still, I had never heard of this. And I was like, oh, because, and so the French are totally like, no, this is not true. But the English are like, yeah, there's probably some truth to this. But yeah, I'll try to find that and dig it up for you. But yeah, that story was great. There was another story on there. There was there were like the big Lovecraftian ones in there, and I'm trying to put my finger on it right now. But that one was like the one that I was like, okay, if I was going to suggest this to a Lovecraftian, that one like hit on so many levels. It was perfect. And I loved it because it wasn't Tentacle Cthulhu. You know what I mean? It was very subtle. It came from another level type of thing. But the thing that I loved about you was you're so good at having a very distinctive voice with your characters. And even like the months that have gone by since I've read it, I still remember the voices of your characters.
Thank you.
Like all of the girls who are going to swim together, like that story is haunting. And that was with who was your and you are fearless with your collaborators. How do you end up collaborating with people?
How do I end up working with them, or
yeah? How does that come about for you?
Well, in the case of Dive in Me, so Dive in Me was co-written with Jesse Bullington, and Jesse Bullington and I have been friends since middle school. He grew up in the same town I do. So that was just, you know, great probability and luck that I had such a talented friend, and we both grew up to be writers and wanted to write the story together. Let's see, Jeff Vandermeer and Anne Vandermeer also live in my town, and I kind of hooked up with them back in the day when I was doing internships for various publications, and I was interested in helping out with Weird Tales when Anne was the editor for that, and she didn't really need anything from me, but Jeff needed some administrative help, and so I started with that, and as he got to know me and my interests, started giving me more responsibilities until I became co-author of the Steampunk Bible, which he and I wrote together. So I don't really have a grand design. It's just luck. I really love collaborating with people. It's the best way to learn, really, because you get to see on the page how it all begins for them, and then you get to kind of reassess how it begins for you and suss it out. But I've been very lucky, but it's also just been. It's not your typical like professional hookup, I guess. It's been, you know, more about my community in Tallahassee than anything else.
Yeah, and it's just weird because I think right about the same time that I was reading calls for submission, I was listening to another podcast where they were asking if there was such a thing as a Florida Gothic.
Oh yeah.
I was like, and it was right when I was reading Dive in Me, and I was like, of course there is.
Ybor
Yeah.
City, man. Ybor City.
Well, I think there was also
Ybor City, yeah.
there was also, I can't remember which book it was. It was the Lovecraft Code, because he was talking about the doctor, and it's a famous real case where the guy, his wife was dying, and he was a doctor right around World War II, and he was trying to keep the body preserved. I can't remember the guy's name. Morbid Anatomy Museum, one of the filmmakers here, made a documentary about it using puppets, and it's a real case. The guy actually lives. It's an actual real case where this guy lived in World War II, and I think it was down in St. Petersburg or something like that.
Oh gosh.
Where he tried to keep in the body light in a state of suspended animation, and in the Lovecraft Code by Peter Levenda, he actually writes about this guy. And I was like, of course there's a Florida Gothic. I mean, because it was just funny that Pete Rollick's doing this, and then you got Peter talking about it, and then I read Dive Into Me at the same time. I'm like, of course there's a Florida Gothic going on here all at the same time.
Are you talking about the guy who was he was an X-ray technician in
Yes.
Key West?
Yeah,
It was in
Oh,
Key
it's in
West.
Keys?
Yeah.
Key West.
Yeah. He fell in love. It wasn't his. I don't think it was his wife. In fact, there's a story about this in Legends of the Reanimator that Dave Bernard did. He falls in love with this girl and she dies, and
Yeah.
keeps her body preserved in her mausoleum,
Yeah.
and keeps trying to resurrect her for years. And it's Florida, right? And it's pre-World War II, so there's no air conditioning. There's no refrigeration. So this body is literally rotting as he keeps trying to work for months and years to resurrect it. It's a terrifying little story, and apparently it was all very public knowledge, but the Keys is a different place.
Yeah.
So
The Florida part about that to me, though, is like what you're saying about it's Florida. It's like humid, it's heat, like nothing's going to survive. But that dude, the original Florida man, is like, I can do it.
yeah,
I'll
well,
make this happen. Like, that's the Florida Gothic to me. Is like
Yeah.
the hubris of like the supernatural here and the ghost stories and what's going to happen to you all the time is through the roof and unlike anywhere else I've ever heard.
very early on in my career down here in Florida, I read this story about this guy who was arrested and was going to court so that he could get his alligator back because he was sleeping with his alligator.
Ew, like really sleeping?
Yeah. And it was then discovered that there is actually no law against bestiality in Florida.
They're still not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So homosexuality, yeah, there was. Bestiality, no. So yeah, Florida's a very strange place.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Very weird. Very
I
weird.
was stationed in St. Mary's, which is like right next to like you can see and hit the Florida border. And so I was telling my wife, because she used to live in Colorado, and I was like, I think Colorado used to be like the Wild West when like Hunter Thompson lived there, and like it's kind of grown up and been settled type of thing. And I think Florida has now taken over that mantle where you can get away with pretty much everything, like taking bath salts and eating people's faces.
I have a Lovecraftian story about that was so that that then put it away. And and I'm like, come on. But no, I think Zane Grey wrote several Florida books set in the southwest of Florida, and at some point he basically calls Florida as the true Wild West. Because we don't have air conditioning, and we're not really settled, until air conditioning comes along after World War II. The state is a wasteland.
Yeah.
There's only the coast was habitable. And then so all on the West Coast and the mangrove islands and everything, it's lawless.
Yeah.
And you get great stories like this, but like Peter Mathiassen's Doc Watson trilogy, and some other stories like that. Really great stuff that sort of out cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, the Rum Runners are great.
Documentary about the one town in Florida. It was like very early in his career, where everybody was injuring themselves for the insurance payments.
That hasn't changed.
I'll have to look up the name again, but it's like late 70s, early 80s, and it was way before Errol Morris became popular. It's a great documentary, but it was way before I got stationed down there. And I remember like when we went down there, we rented like Deliverance, and there was another Southern Gothic type of thing that were like, these are training films. This is how you're going to get along with the general population type of thing. And that was one of them. We were like, watch this, live it, love it, learn it type of thing.
Yeah, Wild Things is like the quintessential Florida movie. It's like, yeah, you know what? We did that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I remember that's when I first fell in love with Walter Mosley, too. Was when I was down there, was reading Walter Mosley books all the time, because he pretty much nailed it down there.
Have you all read Harry Crews?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's from up your neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a pretty good example of how weird it can get, but I mean, he's writing very realistically for the most part, but he's a pretty
He drank
good
himself
example.
to death, right?
Oh yeah, he's Florida.
Yeah,
come on.
he's Florida guy. Right. Yeah,
We're all drinking ourselves to death down here. What else is there to do? Can't eat bath salts anymore. I mean, that's.
Well, I think when I was down there was when Lydia Lunch and eZine Cervenka were doing their big Harry Crews. Remember, they were like very Harry Crews type of thing, and that's when, at the time it was like Lydia Lunch was the ultimate goth woman, and you were like, Harry Crews guy, and so there was me and one other guy that we would read books, flip them to each other type of thing, and so that's how we called it the Great Selby Slide. So all like the Selby books, and we were like, let's check out Harry Crews, and then we're like, oh man, he's as dark as Selby. This is awesome.
Yeah, he's hard to get through too sometimes.
Yeah.
But so there's that part of Florida Gothic, but then there's also just the nature. And for me, where I'm at, Peter, have you been up to Tallahassee, North Florida?
I try to avoid Tallahassee.
Oh man, you got a police.
Oh wait, I have been to I'm sorry. Yes, I have been to Tallahassee.
Legislature's gonna get you.
I am a state employee, so
okay.
I try to.
I understand.
When I am summoned at Tallahassee, it's never a good thing.
No. I used to work for the state too, so yeah, I understand. Well, so Tallahassee kind of is where all the Floridas meet. Florida has like 3 or 4 different geographical appearances and ecosystems and stuff, and they all kind of meet in Tallahassee, which makes it its own magical weirdness. If you've read Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation, you kind of get a sense of it, because I think parts of that landscape are based on an area outside of here called St. Mark's. But there's sinkholes, there's dolphins, but also the alligators. There's all the things you think about Florida, but they're all together and they all don't quite fit, and they don't want you there. So that's sort of my other notion of Florida Gothic.
So I will tell you this story that only people in Florida will get. Just before the hurricane, about a week before the hurricane came through.
Which one?
Um,
Like recently?
yeah, like
Okay.
last month. What was it?
Irma?
Irma.
Okay.
Right. I'm out walking the dog at midnight, and I turn the corner, and underneath the street light, there's these two little kids with their two little dogs, and they're playing with something.
Oh.
I'm like, what are you guys doing? And it's like, and they're holding cane toads in their hands.
What? Cane toads or turds?
Toads.
Toads. Okay.
Cane toads. Bufo frogs. Bufo frogs. Right? And I'm
I
like,
was like,
put
hey.
those down. Put those down and go wash your hands. And are you new to Florida? And they're like, yeah, we just moved here from Nevada 2 days ago. And I'm like, welcome to Florida. Everything here wants to kill you, including that toad that you just picked up, because it's highly hallucinogenic and it will kill your dog.
They
And
probably
then-
licked it
and then,
before
like-
you came over. They're
Yeah.
like, it's okay, it's cool.
Yeah, and then like a week later, like we're like boarding up the houses for Irma, and their parents are like, "We just moved here." It's like the state does not want you here. You
Yeah,
know,
welcome to Florida.
welcome to Florida. Though even the weather will try to kill you. So,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of reptiles here. And if you have a phobia, it is not fun.
That was my introduction, because when I first got stationed there, the first night I went to do laundry, and it was mildly raining, and I saw what looked like small earthworms. So I went to step, and one of them kind of reared back,
Oh.
and I was like, I kind of went around it, and I asked my instructor the next day. I was like, "The hell is that?" And he goes, "Oh, those are baby rattlesnakes." I was like, "At least they're just babies." And he goes, "No, those are more poisonous than the adult ones are." And I was like, "No, screw this state. This sucks."
Yeah.
Before we get too crazy on the reptile stuff, I just wanted to ask, the thing that I really appreciated about your stories when you do get into the teenage characters is you don't go too alternative. You know what I mean? People kind of go too overboard with it to kind of prove their credentials.
Right.
And the other story that you had on there with, I don't want to give away too much of what happens in any of your stories, but the one with the girl who's dealing with her mother and the hypnosis, I forget the title of it. I apologize for that. If you can just tell the title of it.
It's the last session.
Yeah.
And her mother has cancer is what she's dealing with. Her, they don't have health insurance, and her mother has stage 4 cancer, and so they're trying out other stuff, and it doesn't go well.
But I really liked the way that you dealt with bands and music and how important they are.
Thank you.
To young adults, or even anybody, but especially young adults at that time. And I was just wondering if you could talk on that. You know, how you came about writing that and dealing with that.
Well, I probably will only ever write about youth culture in the 90s because that was my youth culture. I have no idea what's going on now. But back then, we didn't have the internet. If you were lucky enough to live in a town that there was a cool person that had the hookup with zines, that was kind of your internet. That was how you learned information. So music was about the only thing you had accessibility to, and that actually was through pretty mainstream channels like MTV. So for me, when I was growing up, you know, I associate major parts of my coming of age with specific albums. And for me, that was Nirvana, Bikini Kill, Babes in Toyland, Hole, all of that, and it wasn't just music, there were ideas that traveled with these bands, with punk rock, and you know, it was kind of like the end of punk rock at that time, but the notions of punk rock and the feminism that was getting integrated within it was a real game changer for me. And there wasn't shit that I could do about it at the time. But sit in my bedroom, put on my headphones, play my guitar, and just pretend that I was as cool as these people. And that kind of helped shape my ethics, my morals, my drive. So music was what I was as a person when I was 13. So, and it was for my friends too. So I really try to honor that because I think it's a very special thing. I don't know, like I said, what youth culture is like now, but when you're into something now, you don't get to have that private moment with it anymore because you go online and find that a million other people know what you're talking about too, and they love it just as much as you. So it kind of devalues it in a little way because all of a sudden you realize like, oh, Kurt Cobain isn't just talking to me. That sucks. But back then it was like you were having a communion with this band. Like Cat Byland was screaming at you. Courtney Love was telling you to screw off. Like you were having this direct interaction. And I don't feel like you get that anymore. So I really wanted to try to preserve that in my two 90s stories, Dive in Me and The Last Session.
Yeah, because I don't know, there was something about it that I really like. I felt in both of those, you allowed the characters to be honest with, a lot of times I see, to me at least, it feels like writers almost try to name check everything in order to get credibility or street cred almost. And you almost took the opposite route and you connected more emotionally, going, this is the feeling that you get from them instead of checking bands. And I felt that to be a more honest approach almost.
Thank you.
And I really appreciated that. I found that to be a very honest way of doing it.
Thank you.
And the other thing that I really liked, and I thought it was a great approach in your collection, was the wine tasting notes. In between, I thought that was a great idea. Did those come from personal experience? Like, was this something that happened in your travels, or?
For the most part, well, so the idea came from my best friend Stacy. She's my wine buddy, and we both were traveling Europe around the same time, and both got into wine at the same time. And she told me, you should write a story about every bottle of wine you drink and what it means for you, because the idea is that a specific vintage or a specific varietal can transport you to where you were the first time you experienced it. So the three stories, they kind of break up the collection. They're sort of like the levity, the comedic relief kind of, but they each touch on an experience I've had either in traveling, like getting too drunk to go up a German mountain at 90 degrees, an experience I had with some bad tourists in Nice. And then the third one is a very highly stylized fictionalization of a thing I went through, but it was about dealing with my grandmother's death, associated with the wine that I drank during her mourning. But it was used through the device of Frida Kahlo's What I Saw in the Bathwater. So that very much draws upon like the synesthesia experience of wine or any kind of sensorial experience you interact with, really.
Yeah. And because that was kind of where I was pulling up to, because I know that you've been working on the Steampunk Paris project. And how did that come about? I was kind of curious as to how. See, I think that's what I'm most curious about your work, because you have all these divergent strains coming together, but they seem very organic. In a way, they don't seem forced.
Yeah, I'm all over the place.
But I think that's wonderful. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
So I was just curious how the Steampunk Paris came about.
So Steampunk Paris came, so in 2011, I mentioned earlier that I collaborated with Jeff Vandermeer. We wrote a book together called The Steampunk Bible, out from Abrams Image. And I interviewed a lot of the international steampunk participants, and the people that I clicked the most with were the French steampunks, because it's about Verne and Baudelaire and Napoleon III, and just, I'm also a Francophile, so during that period when all I was doing was studying 19th century literature, most of it was French. So I really understood steampunk more through their lens. And so a friendship was struck up. I got to go on tour and promote the book in London and Paris. And when I was in Paris, I hung out with the people I interviewed. And the main person was Morgan Guri. And he offered to take me on a tour of steampunk Paris. And he did. He wrote me a little itinerary and took me around. He gave me my first view of the Eiffel Tower. And I was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. And it's in a completely different way. And I was like, you and I should write about this. So we published, again, Mung Bean comes up. We published about 5 or 6 articles about steampunk Paris. And we decided that we wanted to expand it into a book. We started working on it in 2015. I went back to Paris to do more research. But we went on a little bit of a hiatus, but we're picking it back up again. But the way that I kind of get hooked up in all these projects and pursue all these projects is I'm not really into just one thing. I have a lot of different interests, and they all seem to sort of, if they do have one thing in common, it might have to do with a timeline, like maybe the 19th century or something like that.
Right.
But I just have always pursued what I'm interested in and what seems exciting. And as someone, you know, in high school used to daydream about running away to Paris and doing that whole thing, steampunk Paris is like a real passion project for me.
Yeah. Well, that's like, did you ever read, Theodore Roszak did a book called The Memoirs of Elizabeth Frankenstein?
No, but I have heard of it. I'm trying to think.
He's the guy that wrote, I'm trying to think, he wrote this book, Flicker, which is like this amazing book about the Knights Templar and movies. It's it's bizarro. It is the total left-handed cigarette, like off in the wilderness type of book. But he also did another one called Where the Wasteland Ends. But this one is, it's set up with the idea, it's told through Elizabeth Frankenstein, like the fiance of Frankenstein. But then the narrator, I'm trying to remember, I think it's Victor Frankenstein, but it's told in a totally condescending, women have no place in science, you know, from that viewpoint type of thing. But set up as if Mary Shelley's mother has said that it should be an alchemical type of union. And therefore, these two will be brought together and everything shall be done as this type of, it's a great book. Like, and nowadays you can get it off 8 books for, I think, $2.
Okay.
Yeah, it's way cheap type of thing. It was just one of those things I was like, oh, I should totally ask her if she's ever read it. It was totally awesome type of thing. But no, because you have this great string going through it. And one of the things I know that you're doing, and I have no idea what the project is, but you're working on a Leonora Carrington read-along. What's going on with that? Because I love Leonora Carrington, so.
Okay, so it is, Leonora Carrington is a British woman surrealist who's Centennial, excuse me, whose centennial is this year. And in addition to being an amazing alchemical imagination painter, she also was a writer, and all of her work has been republished this year in various different editions. I love Leonora Carrington. I did a thesis on women surrealists in college. So, you know, the person who was banging at the door at 3 a.m. waiting for all her books was me. So I'm doing a read along for Weird Fiction Review where right now I'm finishing up going through the short story collection that's out from the Dorothy Project.
Right.
And after that concludes, I'm turning that in this week. After that concludes, I will also be looking at Down Below and her children's book, Milk of Dreams, and a brand new biography that was written about her that's like the first biography. Everything else have been like monographs or seen through art.
Right.
I don't have a project in mind right now. It's just sort of I just wanted to read a little bit more deeply. And so this has been an incentive to keep me on that task for her. But lately this year, the way that I've kind of been dealing with my place in the world at the moment is to kind of look at the parallels of what the surrealists were doing during World War II. So the read along for her stuff is sort of a microcosm of the exploration I've been doing and visiting all the women surrealists this year. And I don't know if that'll turn into something later or not, but I wrote a piece for Lit Hub in the summer about my women surrealist survival kit and what each artist has sort of taught me about resistance. So we'll see if anything else comes of that. But right now it's just, I just love reading the women surrealists. So
that just caught my attention because I lectured at NYU's The Occulture and the Humanities.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman, Susan Albrecht, who wrote a book on Leonora Carrington's, she was a friend of Leonora Carrington, and she wrote a book on her artwork. And she was talking about how Leonora Carrington, and I will screw up the pronunciation again, so I apologize in advance, Remedios Varo,
Mm-hmm.
who was also another surrealist, how the two of them would cook together and create these spells together.
Yeah.
And I cook all the time, so I ran up after she was done, and I was like, oh my God, do you still have like the recipes and stuff? And she's like, oh my God, darling, they were the most horrible recipes ever. Ink and hair and squids, and you never want to do these ever. And I was like, so Susan and I have become really good friends, but she, like, her stories about Leonora Carrington, I don't know if I sent you pictures. We have one of Leonora Carrington's plants in our house.
Yes.
Yeah, so I
That's
love
really
Leonora.
cool.
Because when I first got into her was through The Hearing Trumpet,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because that was the only book that was available at the time.
Yeah.
But have you ever read Jodorowsky's book, The Mystical Journey of Jodorowsky?
No.
Because
Is that his tarot book or?
no, it was done before his tarot book.
Okay.
So if people don't know Jodorowsky was the guy who directed El Topo and The Magic Mountain. He's like a Spanish surrealist avant-garde filmmaker that does like these metaphysical westerns that are totally crazy. You should go watch them. You'll freaking love them. But he did this book called The Metaphysical Journey of Jodorowsky. And in one of them, he talks about when he was in Mexico, and he's like, I want to become a shaman. And somebody's like, you need to meet Leonora Carrington. And so he goes to meet Leonora Carrington, and she's like, you will become my disciple. And she has him eat sugar skulls with her. He describes it as she turned into an owl and flew up a chimney. And like she puts him through hell for like weeks after. If you love Leonora Carrington, you have to get the book and read it. It's hysterical.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
But it talks about, I think it's Bunel wanted her to become his mistress.
Mm-hmm.
And she trashed his hotel room and was like, I will never become anybody's mistress. It's wonderful. Like if you read it, it's great.
The biography that I just read by Joanna Moorhead is a wonderful biography. So Joanna Moorhead was cousins with Leonora Carrington. And so she traveled to Mexico and had several conversations with her towards the end of her life. And so it's completely fascinating because you're getting it from Leonora Carrington's perspective. But none of that stuff is in there.
Yeah.
And so, and you know, it's not that I necessarily encourage sensationalist biography or anything, but you know that there is a certain streak and it's just not addressed at all.
Well, all of the Mexican surrealist stuff is wonderful because I love the story, and I can't remember which one the surrealist it was, but they wanted to start a school for surrealists in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked to one of the local craftsmen. He goes, I need a drawing table done. And he drew the table for them, and he did it in perspective with, like, you know, the legs in front a little bit longer than the legs in back. Came back to pick up the table, and the craftsman had built the table exactly that way. The legs in front were longer than the legs in back. So the table was cute. And he goes, we have nothing to teach these people. They're already surrealists from top to bottom. Like he left. He was like, we're done.
Yeah.
So what's next on your list of things to do? Are you doing more short stories, or is there a novel in progress?
Well, there's always a novel in progress. But the thing that I'm working on right now is I'm co-editing an anthology with Jason Heller called Mechanical Animals. It's shaping up to be a really, really good anthology, if I don't say so myself. It has Michael Sisko, Joe Pulver, Molly Tanzer, Maurice Broaddus and Sarah Hans and, you know, several other people, and they're all top-notch stories. And it's all based around the idea of the history of the mechanical animal. And that is coming out next year through Hex Publishing, and we're right now finishing up all the edits and stuff. So that's my main focus at the moment. And
You had a
see
story
beyond that.
Didn't you?
I'm sorry?
You had a story mixed up, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I have a story mixed up.
Which, that's a great idea. Go ahead and pitch that. 'Cause
Yeah.
I love the idea.
I have like a bunch of weird little miscellaneous things, but yeah, the proudest thing that I've done so far this year is written a story for Mixed Up. So this is a recipe book / fiction anthology by Nick Mamatas and Molly Tanzer. And it features really delicious and very point-on recipes by Molly. She is an excellent mixologist. And my story is called, so every writer was given a drink to involve in the story in some way, and I was given the French 75. The only caveat is you couldn't write in a bar. So I wrote about the weird peer pressure. I don't know if anyone has ever experienced this, but when you get in your 30s, everyone's life starts to change, and you realize you and your friends aren't on the same page anymore, and they're peer pressuring you to be on their page. So my story is about that, but also about public drinking, and it's not weird at all. It's pretty realistic, but it's called Arrangement in Juniper and Champagne. And that is now available. That hit the shelves this week. It'd be a great gift book. And it's from Skyhorse.
I love the idea because there used to be short fiction everywhere.
Yeah, and that was one of the real impulses for them. Was fiction used to be just part of the content of Unlikely Places. So they're trying to take two sort of unlikely entities and mixing them together to show that fiction has a place everywhere. Yeah,
and it's kind of a weird divergence, but that kind of hit home with Hugh Hefner's death.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was making jokes about Playboy, and I was kind of like, you know, it was weird, but Playboy did actually have to have stories within it. Like, that used to be the punchline. Oh, you're reading Playboy for the stories, but
right.
Playboy did have stories. I remember Bob Guccione Jr. started Omni because he was spinning off from Penthouse and kind of wanted to bite Hefner's type of shtick there. And so I was kind of like, there used to be stories, and even my mom's Red Book, for God's sake, had story, short fiction. And all those magazines paid much better than short fiction writers make nowadays. And that's not even adjusted for.
No, it's not. I got really morose one time and self-torturous. And I went through my collected stories of F. Scott Fitzgerald, which itemizes how much he was paid for each story. And it's like, you know, he got $10 for this one or $50 for this novella. But I adjusted the inflation, and he was making $50,000 on short stories a year. And I was like, I'm making maybe $1,000 if I'm lucky. Like, I didn't get the inflation prices. It hasn't changed at all, like since the 70s.
Yeah, even if you read Lovecraft stuff, what he was making.
Mm-hmm. Or Kurt Vonnegut and Neil Gaiman, even recently, more recently. Or Stephen King, you know, I mean, he was writing for what do you call him? He called him, I mean, he meant like
he wrote
rags,
for
but
Knave and...
Yeah, all the kind of...
Yeah, Men's Mags.
Men's Mags, that's right, Men's Rags.
Yeah, because I was reading, there was somebody that killed themselves because they had gone through the changeover to what they called Men's Mags. And they couldn't make as much money as they made before that. And they developed cancer. And so they killed themselves.
Jeez.
God, I can't remember. It's one of the guys that I really love. I'll think of it in a minute as we're still going along. I have the collected writings from Centipede Press, The Monster Midway. I'll think about it. It's the guy. But anyways, and you look at the writing, even without like going, oh, that was back in the 30s. It's like, they were getting how much a word?
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap. You know, it's like, now screw it. You know, you're done. One of the things I really want to talk to you today, and we both talked about this, when I first asked you my very stereotypical question about cosmic horror, and we talked about body horror, you know, if you could just talk on that, because I think that's amazing. Like, I love the fact that you just came back with that.
So what I came back with to ASAP's question about my, it
so
basically was kind of like my idea about cosmic horror. So I kind of mentioned earlier that my cosmic horror is more like a romantic notion of sublimity. So I won't rehash that necessarily, but I think kind of the place that I left it in, because ASAP and I are doing an interview consequently to this, I think the place I left it was there's always, cosmic horror has always kind of been a natural state for women and people of color and LGBTQ, because the whole world is out to get you. But actually today I was kind of thinking about the changes to the birth control clause and the general healthcare stuff that's going on. And that is body horror, is if you have any sort of illness and you don't have a way to take care of it, there's this whole idea of your body revolting against you. So I think everyone deep down has an idea of what body horror is. It's a fear of being knocked out, not being able to function and do what you need to do. But to go back, and so I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but what I mean by that, I mentioned the story of the mother with cancer, stage 4 cancer, and they didn't have health insurance. Well, when you have a terminal illness like that, your body starts to transform. The disease that's been inside you starts to come outside and express itself outside. And it's that whole idea of you don't know something's there because it's underneath the surface. And one of the hardest things for family and for yourself to deal with is when your body's changing. And you can even take that to a less, to a more innocuous state with women who go through menopause. The minute that begins to happen, their entire chemical dynamic has changed, and all of a sudden they're not as emotional as they used to be, or their metabolism has gone insane. Like you've lost control of something that you realize you've never had control of to begin with. So for me, that's kind of what I try to explore with body horror, and I do tend to focus more on women's body horror, just because I pretty much experience it firsthand.
Yeah, that was, it was a great answer to it. Oh, and the writer,
we should probably wrap up after the next couple of questions, ASAP, so we can talk to Glenn.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say the writer I was trying to remember is William Lindsay Gresham.
Okay.
And he's the guy that wrote Nightmare Alley.
And he killed himself?
Yeah, he killed himself because he was an old, he was an old writer from the 30s and 40s. If you read Nightmare Alley or see the movie, it's one of the great film noirs.
Okay.
Then he wrote a great movie he wrote a great novel that's one of the great American novels nobody knows about being a World War II vet and being in a TB hospital.
Okay.
It's grim as shit. It's a great body horror type of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And everything turned into men's market type things.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the, I think it's late 50s, he got jaw cancer. Mm-hmm. And he's like, there's no way I can afford medical treatment. So checked into like a flop hotel, killed himself type of thing. But thank you so much, Selena. This was
thank you.
Yeah, and that there was perfect.
Well, I have to say,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being on. I have to say, this is the easiest interview I ever conducted. So thank you, ASAP. Appreciate it. Selena, really, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was
a great interview.
So, you all have a great night.
You too. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Well, Glenn, we had last name again, Winkleman, is that right? You're still muted. There you go.
Yeah, Winkleman. It's my last name.
We had microphone problems last time you were on, so let's see if we can do this again for a few minutes.
Absolutely.
Triptych, am I saying that right?
Yeah, Triptych.
Okay, I'm going to read from the webpage. Triptych is a Lovecraftian walking simulator written with a lore of Gnosticism, occultism, and cosmic horror. Legend has it that an ancient civilization once summoned an elder god from the heavens and paid the ultimate price. They now live on as a necromantic cult that the Calm brothers accidentally discover in their lifetime. So this is it's a game, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's a first-person interactive narrative, primarily a video game.
Your microphone's acting up again. See if we can get through this. I don't know what it is. But you have to have Crisis in order to play this, right? Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's correct. You need to have Crisis in order to install it. So my game Triptych is free to play. You just have to own the base game for it. It's a video game modification.
Okay. And can you just briefly talk about the game?
Sure. So Triptych is, as you described, basically a interactive Lovecraftian narrative set primarily in Gnosticism. That is a subsect of Christianity that I discovered a while ago in my tangent through Lovecraftian fiction that struck me as almost cosmic horror reality of these religions that Lovecraft portrays in Call of Cthulhu and these cults and stuff, right? Basically, to bring it to a nutshell on how it applies to Triptych, they believe that the God that created our Earth is an evil, antagonistic figure, and that there's one beyond it, which is not. So I thought it would be interesting if I explored that kind of gem of a story seed into a Lovecraftian narrative that an ancient civilization will pull down this God through a cult system of black magic and occultism and say, hey, welcome, we worship you. And then he's horrible. He takes over their civilization, fractures them at the core, and then thousands of years later, these once proud people are erased from history and live on as necromancers, trying to scour the earth for hidden knowledge and resurrect the dead to interrogate them. Lots of allusions to Lovecraftian's own tropes, but with more of a pronounced occultism than the subtleties that he integrated into his narratives.
How long does it take to play the game?
It's about 3 hours.
Okay, and it's free. Do I have that right?
Yeah, it's free. So yeah, to go back on that, how it works is if you own the video game Crisis, you can download my game and just put it on top. It's got its own launcher, its own settings, instructions with the download. So as long as you own that base game, my game is made using their graphics engine and their assets for free so that people who like this sort of thing can just play it for free, without having to put any cost down.
Okay. I can't think of any more questions to ask about it. So basically you need to have Crisis and then you can upload the game for free and play it.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's a very pronounced Lovecraftian story. So any fans of weird fiction or just Lovecraft in general, there's a little bit of Thomas Ligotti in there too. It's been in development for about 7 years, with the screenplay being written for about as long. So,
oh wow,
it's a very, very articulate, very slow burn story. So you need to be in a particular mood for it. It's not really, doesn't have much levity, but it's morose, it's focused, and it has a lot of intricate layers to tell about my perspectives on Lovecraftian horror, weird fiction in general, and the cost.
It's a Lovecraftian game that's morose? That doesn't fit at all.
I know. It's,
so you're focusing on like the Demiurge or the Archons?
The Demiurge is, yeah, basically the first one. So he is not literally the Demiurge, but like how can we translate him into a Lovecraftian story kind of thing. Okay. Yeah, so there's archetypes with the other things you mentioned, and the hidden scrolls and all that good stuff if you actually look at the real religion, but primarily just the Demiurge and his movement through time, and then he comes to our modern time eventually and interacts with the two characters that you play.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell us about the game before we're done talking about Triptych?
No, I think unless anybody else has any questions, I think we pretty much covered it.
Well, here's what I'll do. I'll post later. If you're watching this live, you won't see it. But if you're watching later, or if you're listening on the podcast, I'll have a link to Triptych for people to download it. So, and it's free, and it actually looks pretty cool.
Thanks, man.
So, all right. Thank you, Glenn. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on the show. You guys have a great night.
You're welcome. You too.
Guys, take care.
All right. So, Justice League trailer came out.
Hold on. Before you do that, I want to show you guys something.
All right.
I finally picked up a Joe Burrows art piece. This is
Oh,
Shogner
yeah.
Fawn from Frank Belknap Long's The Horror from the Hills.
That's
Yeah.
really gorgeous.
yeah.
It is, and
He's so
has
talented.
he's always been my favorite old one, and this is probably one of the better depictions of him. And I just got this in the mail like 10 days ago after ordering it at Necronomicon.
Does
Nice.
he only have one eye?
No, he has two eyes. He actually has, there's an eye here and there's an eye here, and then there's like something there as well. So
But
there
only
might be three eyes.
It looks like he only has one facial eye.
No, I think he's got two. I think they're closed. I think he's sleeping.
Oh,
So, Joe, for anybody listening, Joe Boers, he does fantastic sculptures. And just, I don't know how you get to his stuff. Just Google his name, Joe Broers, Broers.
Yeah. And then he threw in this fridge magnet. It's just
That's a hell of a fridge magnet. How does
Right?
Mandy like that fridge magnet?
no. Mandy does not like that fridge magnet. The kids have all voted it down. Okay, so and oddly enough, for some reason, my metal fridge is not magnetic. So
Oh, I know the type you mean. Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, it's only magnetic on the side. So that's not on the fridge.
is the fridge magnet supposed to represent any monster?
I think I think it does. But I don't know which one. I'd have to go do some looking up, see what's on his catalog.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Well,
Talk amongst yourselves.
well, we do have a few things to talk about. Did you guys see the new, well, first thing, did you guys see the new Justice League trailer?
Yes.
With the Clark Kent cameo?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. What do you think?
I hope. I have hope.
I live in hope
I
too.
live in hope.
This is make or break though for them, really.
Yeah.
So far, it looks good. Oh, we'll
Yeah.
have to see.
I mean, this has to be good. Otherwise the DC extended universe, the movie universe is done.
I thought they were walking away from it anyway.
Where'd you hear that?
Well, they're doing an independent Joker film.
Yeah. I could be wrong, but I thought I read an article that said that they were sort of going to do the Justice League movie, but then they were going to do a whole bunch of independent films, and they weren't going to try for a DC combined universe.
Well, I hope that's wrong. I like the trailer. I hope that the movie performs to the trailer. So
Yes, I
live in hope.
I live in hope too.
So Matt will love this. Somebody decided that Neil Gaiman's A Study in Emerald has not been reprinted enough, and it's being turned into a comic.
Right.
So, looks what?
Well, I mean, that actually, I'm sort of surprised it took that long to come to that point. That's Neil Gaiman's bread and butter was short form comic.
Yeah, true.
Probably arguably some of his most interesting and creative stuff was done in little vignettes rather than the long sustained threads needed for a novel. So you could probably take that and make something really cool out of it. I mean,
yeah.
I think you actually are more fed up with that story's multiple appearances than I.
I like the story. Don't get me wrong. I do like the story. I think it's a great story.
Right. I stopped reading it.
Tired of it.
It's like stopped reading it every time they reprinted it.
Yeah. It says that the graphic novel, that sounds better than comic to some people, is set to release June 20th, 2018. So it'll be a few months.
That reminds me of the movie Jimmy Neutron, where Shane is having an argument with Sid, and he says, what Ultraman think? And Sid says, I don't know. Ultraman's a doll. And he says, no, he's not. He's an action figure. There's a difference.
There is a difference.
What bothers me the most about that, Matt, is that I understood everything that you just said. I know exactly who Shane is.
Yeah.
Who is
Logan used to love that show when he was littler.
Yeah.
I just watched the Jimmy Neutron movie like 3 days ago. Nobody else was in the house, so I thought, well, I have my guilty pleasures.
Okay.
All right.
So Stranger Things 2 comes out, what, October the 29th? Is that right? Something like that?
Something like that.
Oh, I saw another complaint.
Into October.
They are raising the subscription rate on Netflix just before that comes out.
Yeah.
Really? By how much?
Who knows?
Yeah,
Whatever.
but it's only if you have like the very high end plan, and then some. It doesn't affect like your normal plans. If you read the fine print, it's like if you have the high end streaming plan, like the 40K plan, and then if you have another very weird plan.
I don't even know which one I have. I'll have to check.
Yeah, and then it's only like $2.
Well,
take a bet.
I see there's a article at Sci-Fi Wire. That's SYFY. No, sci-fi.com, SYFY. Duffer Brothers promise Stranger Things is entering Lovecraft country in season 2. That's the headline.
Yeah.
Article says Netflix Stranger Things is treading into cosmic horror territory for its second season next month. One of the show's co-creators told Entertainment Weekly today, so get ready for things to get bigger and scarier, like to Lovecraftian proportions. There's an H.P. Lovecraft sort of approach, said Matt Duffer. This interdimensional being that is sort of beyond human comprehension. We purposely don't want to go too much into what it is or what it wants. So, what do you guys say? I'm more excited about Stranger Things season 2 than I was about season 1. It looks great.
You know, okay, I thoroughly enjoyed season 1, but I gotta say, it's like I'm so looking forward to a decent show this fall. You know, this past summer we had The Defenders, which I thought was so much better than the Iron Fist series, and we had the penultimate season of Game of Thrones, and then everything that's come out this fall, pretty much for me, has sucked eggs. And so I'm really waiting.
Which is why you're watching the Jimmy Neutron movie.
Basically, well, you know, I couldn't get the beginning of the end again.
You know what I've been pleasantly surprised by is Orville.
I am unpleasantly unsurprised. That's okay.
I thought it was going to be like this weird comedy like Family Guy thing, and it turned out being like better than the Star Trek series.
Yeah, but it's like that guy cosplaying Captain Kirk with some smart-ass humor. There's really...
I thought it looked stupid. I didn't even try it.
You should try it.
Okay.
It's better than Star Trek Discovery so far.
Well, let's ask Rick about that.
That's not high praise.
I've seen the first 3 episodes of Orville, and they're good. I don't think it's better than Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah, well, check out 4 and 5.
Yeah, I have to catch up with 4 and 5.
Do 4 and 5, because 4 and 5 is when it starts coming into its own.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, how is Star Trek Discovery?
Secret ballot.
Yeah.
I think it if you only saw the first episode, you're going to be disappointed in that it ended on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Plus, you pay the money to see the next part.
I got to say, for Next Generation, season 1, it took a while for me to warm up to it.
Yeah, pilots always suck, so I'll give it that.
One of my new viewers, Gardner, says Star Trek Discovery should be called Star Trek Needless Exposition.
Yeah.
Well,
they have what I find they have a captain who is somewhat corrupt for once.
Yeah.
And
Really?
that I find fascinating.
I have not moved beyond episode 1. Not because I don't like cliffhangers, but because I don't like what apparently is the premise of the story, which, whether it's right or wrong, is, Starfleet at war. This is not what Star Trek is about.
Well, Deep Space Nine ended up being Star Trek.
It ended up that way, yes.
And that was fascinating.
It was, and unfortunately, but I think that while some of those were some of the best episodes, it kind of fell into, once again, I don't think that's what Starfleet is supposed to be about. Starfleet is not a military organization.
You get war forced upon you sometimes.
Yes, right.
And
so we did that.
Here's my comparison. I liked Enterprise, but Enterprise, which ultimately didn't succeed as well as the other shows, took forever to get started. They started to bring in, only in the last season we got Spock and Gorns and all this stuff from the original show. And here we start off right away with Klingon War. Let's not build up to it. Let's get into it right away. Which in some ways is good. They didn't drag it out.
Is there any way to watch this besides going to the network?
P2P.
Yeah, you could also move to any other country besides the United States and watch it on Netflix.
Yeah.
If you like Joe in Germany and you have Netflix, you can watch it.
Yeah. Otherwise, P2P it.
I don't know if I want to watch it that bad.
Yeah. You know what's been saving my bacon is we got Shudder.
Oh yeah, how is that channel?
I'm actually liking it because they have Tales from the Dark Side, which I remember from being, I think I was maybe 14 when that came out, 12, 13. And my memory sucks. So I've been going back to it, and Tales from the Dark Side, actually, it holds up. The costumes are dated and some of the other stuff, but the story writing is solid.
Yeah.
Well,
so
the Twilight Zone, Night Gallery, Outer Limits, and Tales from the Dark Side, and some of the episodes of Monsters, all kind of hold up because they sort of had timeless, semi-moral, or even very moral storytelling.
Yeah.
And not to plug anything, but this is sort of what they're trying to do with that new anthology, Test Patterns. Is go back.
Yeah, well, I don't mind you plugging that though. That seems worthwhile to me.
Yeah, I think they're trying to do it to emulate what those shows did. And I think with looking at the author selection, they've done a really damn good job.
For those who don't know what Test Patterns is and might think it's a book that's already out, it's not. Can you explain it? Because it's a GoFundMe right now.
Right. Test Patterns is a GoFundMe project put together by a couple of decent guys who are fans of the genre and who have come up with this great idea. And in their pitch, they're like, we want to do an Outer Limits / Night Gallery / what was the other one? What was besides Twilight Zone? Kind of thing where the stories not only are there to entertain, but there's also some sort of deeper message there. And which, even Star Trek, when it first started out, the first couple, there were deep philosophical meanings behind some of those episodes. And they've done a really good job putting it together. There's some. It's a great authors list. I'll have to look it up, but because I was not planning on plugging this tonight.
Well, people can Google Test Patterns and GoFundMe.
Right.
I put it on the
Thanks, Matt.
Message board.
I have a question. Why are they doing that instead of, say, Kickstarter? Is it because they don't have to give as much money back to Kickstarter or something?
I don't know what their reasoning was, but this has been a long-term project that is just starting to come to fruition, and I only heard about it at Necronomicon. So,
well, it looks cool.
The other good thing about Shudder is they have series from around the world. So we've been watching, like, I'm going to screw up the pronunciation, Yorkstock. I think it's a Scandinavian series. And that one's really well done. So we've been watching that one quite a bit. So Shudder, we tried it once and it was just constant. Like, you'd be halfway through a movie, it would stop on you, and there is nothing more frustrating than when you're watching a horror movie and it stops like halfway through, or 99% of the way through, and you're like, you're kidding me. But now they've solved those problems, so now we're actually really enjoying it. So that I get to say they've actually upped their game on it. I've been enjoying it. And they've given enough. Like, I like a lot of foreign films. If you don't like reading subtitles, might not be worth your coin. But if you like watching foreign films, I'd look into it.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, getting back to Star Trek for just a second. Guys, I've only seen, like, I think 1 or 2, and this was a long time ago, episodes of Deep Space Nine. You guys think I would like it?
I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. Star Trek is usually 2 stories going on at once. There's the main story, and then there's the side story. And often the side story involves the Ferengi, and it's really quite entertaining and amusing when they do. And I thought the character acting was excellent throughout the series. And they managed to tie into the other Star Trek seasons pretty well. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Okay.
It became my favorite Star Trek series.
Really?
By the time it finished, but it had a thoroughly engrossing plot.
Yeah, I really like the setup, and while it stumbles a little at the beginning, it finally does find its footing.
The first season is the weakest.
Yeah.
Okay, so watch the first season, but no, it's going to get better than that.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
The other thing is, and this is this, Avery Brooks is better when he's bald with a beard. And he looks like Hawk. If he started doing the second season. He changed his look, trying to be different. And he's just a cooler character when he has the Hawk look.
Well, you've hooked me with that being your favorite Star Trek series. That's high praise.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'll start watching it. I think it's on Netflix. I hope it's on Netflix.
It is.
All right.
I'll say one thing I liked about it, the captain had to make the most difficult decisions, I think, on any Star Trek show.
Well, just to keep everybody in the loop on Lovecraftian things, I noticed for a movie called The Endless, and it really looks like Lovecraftian horror. It's from the guys that did that movie Spring. You guys know what movie I'm talking about?
Yep.
Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. And I guess if you Google, I'm at birthmoviesdeath.com, looking at a page there where they talk about it. The Endless, a chronicle of the journey two brothers take to a cult in an attempt to unravel its spiritual mysteries. And the trailer does look somewhat Lovecraftian, and they say after the trailer they write, there's something Lovecraftian about that rope going into the darkness and two characters attempting to define what it is waiting down there in the blackness for them. Anyway, it says it's going to play at film festivals and then will be released for everybody to see. So I don't know what date that actually means, but we'll get to watch it.
Spring was such a good film.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it because I love Spring.
Yeah.
So currently on Netflix, they have Gerald's Game, Stephen King novel,
right,
directed by Mike Flanagan.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it's I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I liked it. We watched it the other night.
It has the only flaw in it I could say is it has sort of the same flaw as the novel in that you get a lot of exposition at the end to explain a certain plot point. But that's the way to do a faithful adaptation story. There's no other way to get around that.
You know what's funny, Rick? I actually told my wife the morning after we watched it, I was like, that was a perfect explanation of Lovecraft's point where he's like, never explain anything.
Yeah.
I was like, that was the best explanation of his point ever done right there.
Mike Flanagan is the guy who directed Absentia. For those who don't know, it's in mine.
He did a great job.
It's been a while since I read the book, but I think the problem was adapting it was there would have been a lot of internal monologue, and he found an excellent way to get around it.
Yeah. It had been long enough since I read it. I could only remember certain points of it.
Yeah.
You know, like points, and I was happy for that actually.
Yeah, I just remember the opening situation and what the exposition was at the end.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for doing the interview, Aesop. Great job, by the way.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful job. The Patreon, if you're not a Patreon, here's some cool stuff that maybe will entice you. It's only $5 a month. Just Google Patreon and Lovecraft eZine. We've got a new entry from Fred Lubnow, Lovecraftian Solar System, and we've got a new Lovecraftian Tales, which is the fiction part of the podcast. One of my favorite stories, The Night Ocean. John Paget read it for me, and for the Patreon pledgers. So it's great. Night Ocean is one of my favorites. R.H. Barlow and H.P. Lovecraft. So, all right, we got anything else?
Fred Lubnow's Lovecraftian Science is one of my favorite websites, hands down. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah, thank you, because I was going to mention that and I forgot. Thanks.
It's amazing balls.
Yeah. Yeah, Lovecraftian Science.
Prize.
All right, well, everyone. Yeah, prize. Lovecraft eZine prizes at gmail.com. What's the prize again, Matt?
Fairy Tales, the anthology edited by Stephen Jones.
All right. And just send an email to lovecraftezineprizes at gmail.com and put fairy tales in the subject and whatever you want in the body of the email. And thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week.